Hello, my name is Dr. Benjamin Browning, and I'm working on my third video for Ambassador International University. And what we're going to be talking about today is how to outline your paper or your thesis. So this is going to look a little bit different for everyone. So that's your disclaimer. This is going to look a little bit different for everyone, but it is a critical step in the process. You have to have a good outline. You just have to. There's no way around it. You cannot do this whole, oh, I'll just figure it out as I go. Do not do that. Once you have your topic and your research question and your thesis and that kind of initial bit of research where you understand what you're talking about, you need to set up an outline. You just have to. Do not skip this step. In fact, I would say set up a working outline, just an outline that could possibly change. Set up a working outline almost immediately. Like as soon as you have your thesis, make an outline. So I'm going to try to help you know how to do that. So first of all, there's not a one size fits all with outlines, but I'm going to try to give you two general approaches to making an outline. Now, these approaches are going to be more for people writing a thesis, like a master's thesis or a dissertation, PhD dissertation or something like that. If you are just writing a paper, you can still apply these principles, though. So these can still be helpful principles. Just understand this is specifically designated and designed for those trying to do a thesis or a dissertation. So let's jump into it. First of all, we want to go back to our document. You remember, if you've watched the other two videos, which you should definitely do, if you watch the other two videos, you know that we've been going back to the same document multiple times. And as we've gone through this document, we have continued to build on the document. So let's go ahead and we'll start by bringing up this new document. Okay, so this is the same document that we've been working on, right? It's when we did the video on topic and research question, this is what we came up with. And then when we did the video on hypothesis and thesis, this is what we came up with. So the last time you watched, you just saw this. You didn't see any of the other stuff. Well, what I did in between videos was I went and I just got a general kind of look at an outline. That's all I did. I just took a general outline that a lot of different websites have. The website I specifically got this from is down here. Honestly, you can get this exact same thing from multiple websites. This is just a very generic general outline for a thesis or a dissertation, right? Again, if you are not writing a thesis or a dissertation or just a major paper, the broad strokes is similar, but it's not going to be as spread out. So first of all, in your outline, you're going to have your title, right? That's the first big thing when you're setting up an outline. You're going to have your title. Next thing you're going to do in your outline is you're going to have a place for your abstract. Again, this is just an outline. I want you to get this. I'm not asking you to necessarily fill in and provide all of this stuff initially, right? You'll just say abstract. This is where the abstract goes. Introduction. You might jot a couple notes about what you're going to say in the introduction, but that's what you're going to do there. You're not going to fill this in yet. In fact, my approach when I do notes is to use my outline while I am taking notes. So I will, sometimes on the same document, sometimes on a separate document, I will take notes by filling those research sources into my outline. That's why I'm telling you, make an outline as soon as you can, because I want you to fill your notes into your outline. That's what I want you to do. Fill your notes into your outline. Fill your sources into your outline. So do it early. So let's talk through this. The first thing, working title, you should kind of get what that is, right? That's just what your initial title is going to be. This will probably change toward the end. If you have a title that you like, you might go with that or you might change it. It depends, right? I've known people to totally finish writing, and then once they're done writing, then they come up with a title. But you want to start with a working title. Doesn't have to be good, just has to be there, right? Next thing is an abstract. An abstract is really just kind of your quick pitch of what this paper is going to be about. An abstract will be somewhere between 100 and 300 words, right? I've seen some that want you to do 100 words. I've seen some that want you to do 2. On the heavy side, 3. So just kind of understand between 100 and 300 words is a good abstract. I usually personally try to keep it under 2. That's kind of my goal when I do abstract paper presentations and proposals. I try to keep it under 2. So looking here, that's your abstract. Again, you're not going to write your abstract. This is just an outline. You are just putting a place on your outline. So that's where my abstract is going to go. Okay. Now, next, after that, you'll have your introduction section. Okay. Your introduction section. Now, your introduction section is going to be just where you set up the research. It's where you actually get things started. So in your introduction section, you're going to introduce what's the problem? What is the issue that I'm trying to solve? This is where you grab that reader's attention. Like, this is the problem. This is the question that arises from that problem, my research question. This is my thesis statement or my hypothesis. And this is kind of the theoretical framework or idea that comes with that. And so what you're really doing with the introduction is it's a setup, okay? You're setting things up. Next thing is you're going to have a literature review. Sometimes this is called a state of research, okay? Sometimes it's called a state of research. A literature review is often called a state of research because what you're doing is you're just saying, I've told you what my topic is. I've told you what my question is. I've told you what my thesis is, or my hypothesis. Now, let me tell you all of the other research that has been done by other people. And this is how I fit in. If you are doing a thesis or a dissertation, this section is essential, right? It is essential. Your goal in doing a state of research or a literature review is not just to tell me, this is all the people that's written about my topic, okay? I could have done a Google search and figured that out if I have a little bit of research skills. That's not what your goal is. Your goal is to tell me, yes, all the people that have written on this topic, but with the specific idea in mind of where have they not written? They wrote about this, but you know what? They didn't get this particular issue. And then this person wrote about this, but they didn't really address this issue. And then this person wrote about this, but they didn't really address this issue. That way you get to the end of your literature review and you can say, notice that while they addressed all of these issues, there's this one area that scholars have not addressed. And that's what I'm addressing. That is your whole idea here. Your whole idea here is, how does my research fill in the gap in the research? We do a literature review because if you're at a thesis level or if you're at a master's level, the idea is that you are in some way filling in a gap, right? At a PhD level, at a dissertation level, the idea is you're not going to get approved if it is not filling a gap in research. And even at a master's level, the idea is that it will at least push forward research to some degree. So what you're doing in your lit review or your state of research is you're saying, this is the current state of research, and this is how what I am doing is going to fill that gap. So you're really, when you're writing this, you're not just saying, hey, this is what everyone else has written on this topic. You're saying, hey, this is what they've written, but here is the gap in their research, and here's how I'm going to fill it. Okay. So far, we've got our working title, our abstract, our introduction, our literature review, and then our methodology is next. So with methodology, this can differ just depending on what type of research you're doing. Whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative research. For this topic, I'm not going to get into that, what the difference is for this. But what you're really doing is, what is your research methodology? You're describing what is the process you're going to go through in order to really explain what you're going to do. Okay? What is that research methodology? So you're not just going to just start writing and hope for the best. No, you should have a plan. Why? The reason you should have a plan or a research methodology is because someone else needs to be able to read your research and come behind you and do it themselves. Okay? If your research is working with some sort of unknown, like human subject or something like that, say you're saying, hey, I'm testing to see if this teaching methodology is effective in this environment. You're saying, okay, I'm testing to see if this teaching methodology that is commonly used in the United States is an effective methodology when applied to the rural Zambian church context. So what I'm going to do is here's my methodology. I'm going to take this approach. I'm going to then apply it to this many settings. Here's how I'm going to choose who I'm going to apply it to. Here's how many people I'm going to apply it to. Here's going to be the size of the church. That's what you're doing. You're going through all of the details of why you chose a particular group to apply that method to. You're going to talk in this section about how you collected the data, how you protected that data to make sure there wasn't bias involved. And so that all takes place in your methodology section. You have to explain to me step by step how you go about your research. Now, if you're doing something that is more in the vein of biblical or theological research, where I'm not necessarily testing a teaching method or a preaching method or a particular missions approach, if instead you are doing something like a biblical studies research, you will still have a methodology. It will look slightly different. It will say, these are the sources. So if I'm doing a biblical studies thing and I'm looking at primary sources, okay, well, these are the primary sources I'm going to look at. This is what I'm going to be looking for when I look into those sources. And you're going to kind of flush that out in your methodology. Okay, so next is your results section. Now, your results section, again, this is a very general approach here, but your results section is going to be the bulk of what you're doing. Your thesis and for your thesis, for your dissertation, it's going to be a big part of what you do. Your results section is going to be the big part. Okay? So with the results section, it may be subdivided into numerous sections. Okay? It may be subdivided into a lot of different kind of sections, and it may be kind of the biggest thing, where your introduction, literary review, methodology may be very small sections. With this approach, your results section is going to be huge by comparison. It's going to be fairly substantial. And your results section is simply, this is me telling you what I found and taking you through that methodology. The methodology is telling you, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And then the results section is me then doing it. Okay? So conclusion now is simply me. I'm now going to draw the conclusions in a concise way and bring all that data together from the results section for you. Okay. And then discussion is merely you interpreting your findings. So let me give you kind of a methodology kind of difference here. Here's what's going to happen a lot of times. So in this case, you've got these 8 different parts counting your title. So you could take this approach. Another way of doing this, and I'm about to show you an example. Another way of doing this would not be to have this as separate sections. Another way of doing this is to combine the introduction, the literature review, and the methodology into one introduction section. So that'd be one chapter. And then after that, your results section would be its own chapter or part. And then your conclusion and discussion would be its own part. So the conclusion is basically you're summarizing the information, and your discussion is you're telling, okay, this is my possible limitations, and this is where we need to interpreting the data, and this is what we need to do next, right? So an approach is to take, instead of doing all of these different parts, another approach is to combine those. So let me show you a way, let me show you how this will look on an actual thesis or dissertation. I'm going to pull up my dissertation. So this is my dissertation. So again, a dissertation and a thesis are somewhat different, but really they're different only in size, right? It's the length that's going to make them different. A thesis is, at least in my context, in the US, a thesis is usually going to be a very short thesis. We're getting into the 40 to 50 pages, and maybe up to 150. So somewhere to 40 to 50 to 150, where your dissertation is going to be usually 150 is very short, and 250 to 300 is getting on the long side. Now, again, in other contexts, like a European context, a British model, where the dissertation is much more substantive because there's not other seminars, the dissertation is going to be bigger. So here's an example of my dissertation. Now, I want you to notice how mine is set up. This is my table of contents. So you've got your initial stuff, your initial acknowledgments, table of contents, figures, and all that. So I don't have the abstract written down, but the reason is because the abstract would actually come before this. So you still have, in my dissertation, there's still an abstract, but it comes before the table of contents, so it's not in this outline. But notice how I outlined it. I have the introduction, and then I put all of that other stuff in here, okay? So mine basically comes in 3 sections. Instead of splitting each one, mine comes in three general sections or parts. The first general section or part is going to be your introduction. So I have my thesis and hypothesis. I have my defining of terms. So that's something that you'd want to have in your introduction. You're defining how I'm using terms, why what I'm saying is important. You have your delimitations. Delimitations is not a term we've used before. It simply means I'm going to explain to you what I am not going to talk about. That is, you're setting up your guardrails, your property line. You're saying, okay, I'm not studying all of these other things. I'm just studying this. The reality is that if you studied everything, you'd never finish your thesis. You can't study everything. If you studied everything, you'd never finish your dissertation. You just can't. You have to set up, for the sake of space and time, you have to set up delimitations, which just means limitations. You've got to limit the scope of your research. So that's what this section is. So these are all things that would typically be considered part of an introduction. Now, notice the way I did it here is I put my state of research within there. Again, the other model we showed you is this is still there. The state of research or the literature review is still there. It's just its own separate chapter. Neither is necessarily good or bad. What you need to do is whoever your chair or your advisor is going to direct you towards what's the best approach and what's the approach your institution would prefer, right? I think at AIU, currently, the other model is probably a little closer to what you'll do. But again, this is the same general thing. It's just how you're going to break up your chapters. So next, we have methodology. And notice what I did before I move on to methodology. Notice what I did with state of research. I split up my state of research by sections. Okay, these are things that people have contributed in the social sciences, historical studies, and biblical studies. You may not break yours up that way. You may break yours up chronologically. That's totally fine. You may break yours up it's not different areas. It's all just chronological. You can do that. That's fine. I chose in my dissertation to do by theme, and then within that to do it chronologically in order that they were written. All right, so next, methodology. So for my paper, my general goal was to examine how Roman officials dealt with civil unrest and mob violence in the 1st century, and then to create a model or understanding of that, and then take that model and apply it to the New Testament. That was my approach. So you see that showing up in my methodology. I have a 5-phase methodology. First thing, explore the 1st century Roman context. Second, examine contemporary social scientific models. Third, create a model. Fourth, apply the model. Fifth, evaluate the model. So that is a methodology. Again, you are going to have a methodology in your mind. The question is, are you going to put it in paper? And we are going to force you to put it on paper. You need to tell us what your methodology is. What steps are you going to take to prove your thesis? And that needs to be in your outline. You need to have a general idea outlined for yourself. So next, you see how I break it down. Now, I break it down into chapters. Okay, so I have my first chapter, second chapter, third chapter, and that's it. So I ultimately have, for mine, again, this is not the only way. This is just the way I did it. For mine, I had that general introduction section. So I had the front matter, the general introduction section. Then I split my actual research into 3 parts. And then I had my concluding stuff, where I had my conclusion, and which is also where I had my discussion stuff there. So I had introduction. So I had kind of a 3-tier approach. I had introduction, content, and that content was subdivided into 3 chapters, conclusion. Introduction, content, conclusion. Okay. Now, if you look at this other approach that I have modeled here, which is also pretty typical, it's basically the same thing. Sorry, that keeps hyperlinking there. Let me remove that. So notice here, they do the same thing. It's just split up into 8 parts, but it's the same general thrust, right? Introductory matter, your content, your results, and your conclusion. Okay? They just got it split into more chapters. The approach that I went with, which was typical at my institution, all the same information is there. All the same information is there, but you've got I just have my chapters subdivided. And I have 3 parts, 3 chapters. Okay. So I have my introductions, all 1 chapter. Then I have 3 chapters of content. Then I have a conclusion chapter. That's it. So there's essentially 5 chapters, but practically it's introduction. Practically it's introduction, including state of research and methodology, then content or reporting what you found, your findings, and then conclusion. Now, this is important that you get this general outline, okay? The reason it's important is because when you do your research, again, and I'm going to do a video about research, but when you do your research, my suggestion is that you use your outline while you're doing the research, which means that when you do your outline, this section here for you, the results section, needs to be flushed out. So once you've got your topic and once you generally know how you're going to argue that topic, in your results section, you need to have that flushed out, just like I did here, where I had it flushed out of, okay, this is going to be my section here. There's my, all right, exploring the Roman context. There's all my information. And I had it outlined so that when I did my notes, so when I did my research, if I found a source on how Roman officials used prevention as a way of stopping civil unrest, I threw that in there, right? When I found that I found an ancient example where they chose to use persuasion to persuade someone not to start a riot, then I use that example. I go ahead and take that source and I put it in that section. That way, when I'm writing, I can just, all my sources are right there while I'm writing. So it's really important for you to get an outline. So I want to underscore for everyone here that this is my approach. Okay, I've tried to give you a bit of a general idea of here's a general thesis outline, and then I tried to give you kind of my outline. And hopefully you saw similarities there. But this is my approach to this. Now, outlining is going to be different for you. You cannot just do what I do, right? Now, it should still have that general thrust. Introductory material, including state of research and methodology, the body, which is where you report your findings, and then the conclusion and discussion. So you should still have that almost 3-phase approach. You should still have that. Now, if you split those across 8 phases, sure, do that. If you split it across 3, great. It's going to really depend on what your institution says, and it's going to depend on what your advisor or chairperson says, and it's going to depend on what are the needs of your research, right? But it's not going to look exactly the same. It'll have that general kind of framing, introductory material, body, concluding material. It'll have that general thrust. However, your research will dictate what it looks like for you. Your research and what your topic is going to really frame how it's going to look. Okay? So make sure you understand that. And again, I cannot emphasize enough. You need to start an outline as early as possible. That does not mean you won't change it. You almost certainly will change your outline as you go. But you need to have, once you get your research question, once you get your thesis or hypothesis, you need to very early on get a working outline that you have made up. And again, flush out the results section. Like the example I gave you didn't have the results section flushed out. The generic example didn't. But just like I had mine flushed out in my table of contents I showed you, you want to flush that out. So when you do research, you can plug any kind of, oh, this is a great source, and you can put it in there for that. Okay. So I would just encourage you to make sure you're thinking through this. Outlining may seem like a simple thing, but it's the skeleton of your paper. And without the skeleton, you're not going to know where anything else goes. If you don't have that framework, you will not know where the rest of the parts go. Because when you're writing a paper, you are building something, and you've got to have that skeleton. You've got to have that frame in order to be able to know, okay, where does this go? Where does this go? You've got to be able to have that. So I hope that this has been helpful, and I will do another video, at least one more video, maybe more than one, as we get into how do you specifically do research.